At 11:40 on a Tuesday night in Chicago, a 27-year-old hotel cleaner named Bella Kovalchuk was handed a stack of fresh towels and told to carry them up to the penthouse floor of the Thornberry. The woman who handed them to her was trembling. 3 days earlier, Bella had sat in a plastic chair at a hospital and been told that her mother's body would remain in the morgue until the outstanding balance was paid. She had a college degree she had never gotten the chance to use, a night shift badge clipped to her uniform, and a mother she could not yet bury. So when her coworker Deborah grabbed her arm and warned her that nobody in the city spoke the name Draycott out loud, that people only wrote it down and burned the paper afterward, Bella took the towels anyway. Lucas Draycott was 37 years old, and he controlled everything that moved through the port of Chicago that was never meant to be seen moving. He never raised his voice. He never issued threats. He never needed to. People who crossed him did not get hurt in any visible way. They simply lost their license, their lease, their good name, and quietly stopped existing in the life they used to have. Half the city crossed the street when his car appeared, and the other half already worked for him without knowing it yet. That particular night marked the anniversary of a fire he had survived as a child, the night he lost the only family he had ever known. He was sitting alone in the dark with more than half a bottle of scotch gone, looking at the woman standing in his doorway in her cleaning uniform the way a man studies a patch of ground he is deciding whether to dig up. "Why are you shaking?" he asked her. "I am not," she answered. "You are, and I already know exactly why you came up here." Then, drunk enough and hard enough to say the cruelest thing he had ever said to another person, he told her to name her price. Here is the part nobody in that room understood yet. Bella did not run, and she did not cry. She stood there with an armful of clean towels and gave him a number that was not round. Not 50,000, not 100. She gave him the exact figure, down to the last dollar, because that was precisely what it cost to bury the only person on earth who had ever loved her. Something shifted in his expression, because in his line of work, people who lie always round up. She walked out of that hotel at sunrise with the money in her account and one rule ringing in her ears. Do not mistake this for anything more than what it was. Do not come back. She believed him. She believed it was finished, ugly but finished. It was not finished. A few weeks later, something happened to Bella that no amount of money could undo, no contract could cover, and no man in Chicago, not even the one who owned half of it, could quietly make disappear. He said nothing else after naming his price. He set his glass down and waited. In the silence, Bella could hear the hum of the air conditioner and the pounding of her own heartbeat, and she understood that if she stepped back now, her mother would stay in that refrigerated drawer for another week, another month, maybe forever. He picked up a phone unlike any she had seen and opened a banking application. "Which bank?" he asked. "Fifth Third," she said. "Name?" "Bella O. Kovalchuk." He did not type. He looked at her and told her to say it again. She repeated it, slower. He asked a third time, and by then something inside her cracked, not from fear, but because she understood what he was doing. He was waiting to see if she would stumble over a detail, the way people always do when they are inventing a story. She answered without flinching. "The O stands for Oksana," she said. "It was the name my mother gave me temporarily before she legally renamed me Bella, because she said I deserved something beautiful." He typed. He turned the screen toward her. "Are you certain?" he asked. She looked at the man whose name the whole city refused to speak aloud, and she thought, "There is no other door left for me to knock on." "I am certain," she said. He pressed confirm. There was no sound at all, only a line of text turning from gray to green. $49,200 left in account she would never be able to trace, and landed in hers. Somewhere across the city, a woman lying in a hospital morgue had just been granted permission to go home. Bella felt no relief. She felt something else entirely, something suspended between gratitude and revulsion, and none of it was aimed at him. It was aimed at a world that had arranged things so that this had become the most reasonable option left to her. "Sit down," he said, and it did not sound like an order so much as something tired. She sat at the edge of the sofa, her hands still clenched as though she were holding a stack of towels that was no longer there. "Do not mistake this for anything else," he told her. "I do not like noise, and I do not like people who cling. I will not remember your name after today, and you will not mention mine to anyone, not even inside your own head. I do not intend to cling, she said. I only need to bury my mother, that is all. He studied her for a long moment, then crossed the room and opened a drawer beside the bed. Bella looked down at the rug and counted the threads along its border, because it was the only thing in her life at that moment she could control. She would remember that rug 7 months later, in a bright examination room, when a doctor asked her whether she still had the packaging from the pill she had been given, and she would answer no, and it would be the most costly answer of her life. At 6:41 the next morning, Bella woke, and, before she remembered where she was, she counted exits. Front door, balcony door, bathroom door. 3 ways out, and she was 11 steps from the nearest one. She knew that number before she understood why she knew it. Her clothes had been folded on the armchair, more neatly than she had ever folded anything herself, and the precision of it chilled her more than if they had simply been thrown across the floor. He stood by the wall of glass overlooking Lake Michigan, shirtless, a glass of whiskey in his hand, fog rolling over the gray water below. You counted, didn't you? He said, without turning around. She pulled the blanket higher. Counted what? She asked. Doors, he said. The moment you woke up, you counted the ways out, before you even remembered my name. She said nothing. Every morning, he said. For 25 years. He said it the way people talk about the weather, without a trace of self-pity, and that single number stayed lodged in her for years afterward, a stone in a shoe she could never quite shake loose. I should go, she said. The transfer came through at 5:03, he answered. Check before you leave if you want. I trust you, she said. For the first time, he was quiet long enough that she heard the ice shift in his glass. Do not, he said. That is the most expensive mistake anyone can make in this city. She dressed with a calm that surprised her, because she had already lived through the worst part of the night and come out the other side. Is there anything else you want? He asked, still facing the window. No, sir, she said. Everyone wants more eventually, he said. You do not know anything about me, she said. And that was the first time he turned around and looked at her directly. And for one brief moment, he did not look like the man whose name the city wrote down and burned. He looked like someone drowning in old grief with a bottle of whiskey before 7 in the morning. No, he agreed, I do not. Still deeply drunk, he crossed to the cabinet drawer and pulled out a small white pill without looking closely, a loose tablet that had come free of its original packaging days earlier. Take this, he said. What is it? She asked. Medicine, he answered. What kind? She pressed. He only looked at her and asked whether she wanted trouble. No, sir, she said, and swallowed it with the water he offered, because a person as desperate as she was did not have the luxury of asking more questions. She picked up her bag and left without saying thank you, and she would think about that omission for a long time afterward, grateful that she had not said it. On a low table near the door lay a watch, its glass face turned up, the leather strap worn thin at one hole. She walked past it without a glance. The door closed softly behind her. Lucas Draycott stayed where he was for a long while. The watch remained exactly where he had placed it the night before, in plain view, in the one spot anyone leaving the room would have to pass. It was not there by accident. It was a test he had used for 15 years, and no one had ever failed it in this particular direction before. She did not take the watch, he thought. It was right there. Everyone takes it. He finished the whiskey in his glass, and that turned out to be a mistake, because for the next 5 weeks he found himself thinking of her every morning at 6:41, standing at that same window, counting doors that were no longer hers to count. 4 days later, on a pale Saturday morning, Helena Kovalchuk was laid to rest in the cemetery behind St. Nicholas Church in Ukrainian Village. 6 people attended. Bella counted them, and the number hurt more than the coffin did. 6 people, for a woman who had worked in this country for 38 years. Her mother's closest friend cried quietly from beginning to end. 2 former neighbors stood nearby. A young woman Bella had never met, someone her mother had once cared for on a night shift, stood at the edge of the small crowd and left before the service ended. A stranger in a long coat stood apart from everyone else and slipped away before the final prayer, and later, when Bella tried to picture his face, she found she could not. The pastor, a man in his late 60s who had known her mother for years, spoke the prayers slowly and deliberately, in both English and Ukrainian, and when he reached the Ukrainian passages, Bella heard her mother's voice inside the words and had to bite the inside of her cheek to keep standing. She had not cried once in 4 days. She had signed paperwork, paid the hospital, paid the funeral home, chosen the plainest coffin because her mother had never cared for anything extravagant, and told the funeral director no when asked if she wanted to upgrade the lining, because her mother had slept on a simple mattress for 38 years and would not have wanted anything more elaborate in death. She had done nothing but pay for 4 straight days, and now that the paying was finished, there was nothing left to do. And it was that emptiness that threatened to break her once everyone else had gone home. The pastor stayed beside her at the grave and, refreshingly, did not offer any of the usual comforts about her mother being in a better place. "Your mother was a stubborn woman," he said instead. "She argued theology with me for 17 years and never once conceded a point." Bella laughed, a short dry sound, the first laugh she had managed in 4 days. "She told me you rushed through the prayers," she said. "I know," he replied. "She told me to my face, more than once." Then his tone changed. "Bella," he said, "your mother left something in my keeping. She told me to hold on to it until you were strong enough." He studied the dark circles under her eyes and her hands, still clenched as though they had not fully opened in days, and said he did not think today was that day. Bella only nodded and thanked him. She did not ask what it was. She had used up every question she had left at the hospital counter and in a hotel room on the top floor of the Thornberry, and the one lesson that night had taught her was that asking questions was a luxury she could not afford. The pastor watched her walk toward the gate, and back in his office, tucked beneath 2 church ledgers, sat a yellowed envelope that had waited untouched for 25 years and would wait nearly a year longer still. 5 weeks later, Bella received a call about a job interview. She had submitted more than 100 applications over 4 years and heard back only a handful of times, so she did not let herself hope. The interview lasted 11 minutes. They asked about accounting standards and how to flag suspicious transactions, and she answered smoothly, because she had studied those things on scholarship and reviewed them alone for years with no one to talk to. Oddly, nobody asked what she had been doing for the past 4 years, and though that struck her as strange, she needed the job too badly to dwell on it. 3 days later, the offer arrived. Compliance analyst, entry level, on the 31st floor of a tower on Wacker Drive, with a starting salary far higher than anything she had earned in her life combined. She read the letter 4 times sitting on the floor of her apartment, then cried for the first time since the funeral, not from happiness, but because her mother had died 5 weeks earlier and would never know. On her first Monday, she arrived 40 minutes early to a lobby of stone and glass, wearing a suit bought secondhand, feeling like she had borrowed someone else's life. A cheerful young man from the information technology department named Benny showed her around, explained the elevators, and mentioned an orientation scheduled for that afternoon that all new hires had to attend, no exceptions, even though the chief executive rarely came into the building. Bella asked, out of simple curiosity, what the chief executive's name was. Benny laughed as though she were joking. "Draycott, of course," he said. "Lucas Draycott. What did you think this building was called?" Bella went still. Not physically, but something inside her simply stopped, the way a machine cuts out mid-cycle. For a few seconds, she heard nothing at all, not the copier, not Benny's voice, nothing. She had stood in the dark and read her own bank details aloud to that man 3 times, so he would remember them clearly enough to send the money. She had told him the story behind her name. He had said he would forget her the moment she walked out the door. He had said it himself. "Are you all right?" Benny asked. "Yes," she said. "I just haven't eaten." She laughed along with him when he said nobody there ever did, and inside her mind she thought, "I have to quit today, before the orientation even starts." Then she thought about the salary, about the 4 years and the 100 rejected applications, about her mother scrubbing floors so she could earn a degree that had sat untouched in a drawer. "He runs a company with thousands of employees," she told herself. "I am one new hire on one floor. He will never notice me. He said himself he would not remember me." She told Benny to keep walking. At the end of the hallway, the executive elevator doors opened, and Lucas Draycott stepped out. He looked directly at her, and not a single muscle in his face moved. He walked past without a nod, without any acknowledgement at all, and that nothing frightened her far more than anything he could have said. Over her first 3 weeks, Bella worked long hours and spoke as little as possible to anyone. She reviewed records quickly and cleanly, better than anyone expected of a new hire, and that turned out to be exactly the problem. Had she performed at an average level, no one might have noticed her at all. The one who did notice was the chief executive's assistant, a polished, precise woman with a pleasant voice that took people a moment to realize had just delivered an insult. It happened one morning in the shared kitchen, in front of several coworkers. The assistant remarked, seemingly making conversation, that she had reviewed Bella's file and found it unusual, since the company rarely hired from public universities, and she wondered aloud who had sponsored her path into the role. The room went quiet, and nobody left. Bella said simply that she had applied on her own. The assistant smiled, said of course, and walked out. By afternoon, a rumor had spread across the floors. By the next day, it had solidified. Bella overheard two voices in the women's restroom repeating a version of it, that she used to clean hotel rooms and had somehow landed here, and wondering how that could possibly have happened. Bella stood frozen in the stall until they left. She did not cry. She washed her hands, looked into the mirror, and admitted to herself that they were, in a sense, right. That was the worst part. They had guessed blindly and landed close to the truth. She had spent a night with that man. She had taken money from him to bury her mother. None of the reasons behind it mattered in the version of the story people were repeating, because the shorter version was easier to remember. She started eating lunch alone in the stairwell. The following week, the assistant needled her again in the open office, holding up a report Bella had written and wondering aloud who had really put it together. Bella said nothing. At that exact moment, Lucas Draycott walked past, slowed by half a step, and said, without even glancing at anyone, that if his assistant had enough free time to interview staff members on his behalf, he would happily find her more work to do. Then he kept walking. The office felt completely silent. Bella felt no relief at being defended. She felt something colder instead, because she understood he had just placed her back in the center of attention rather than pulling her out of it. And there was something else. The assistant did not flinch, did not blush, did not show the slightest sign of humiliation. She simply smoothed the report on the desk and watched him go with the expression of someone quietly taking notes. 2 weeks after that, Bella collapsed in the copy room. Benny found her and called for help. She woke in an ambulance with an oxygen mask over her face, then later in a hospital room, calculating how she would explain a missed day of work. A doctor came in, a woman in her 30s, and told her gently that there had been no mix-up. Bella was 7 weeks pregnant. Bella insisted it was impossible. She explained that she had been given a pill that night and had taken it exactly as instructed. The doctor asked if she still had the packaging or remembered any markings. Bella only remembered a small white tablet, round, no larger than a pea. The doctor told her, without judgment, that a great many things in the world fit that same description, and that vitamins counted as medicine too. Bella sat with that for a long moment. She did not cry. She thought about the way he had pushed that drawer shut with his knee, about the carelessness of it, and she understood something that turned her cold. He had not lied to her. He had genuinely believed he had given her something that would prevent exactly this outcome. He had told her not to come back, certain that the night was closed and sealed. If she went to him now with this news, there was only one story he would believe, the same one the whole office had already been repeating for weeks. She told the doctor she wanted to end the pregnancy. The doctor did not react with judgment either way. She explained the legal process clearly, the options available, the risks involved, without asking who the father was or why. It was the absence of judgment that nearly undid Bella, because for the first time in weeks, someone was treating her like an adult capable of deciding her own path. They scheduled an appointment for the coming Sunday. Walking out through the hospital corridor afterward, Bella had to sit down in a plastic chair because her legs would not carry her any farther. She sat there a long time, thinking, I only just buried you, Mama, I only just buried you. She was still sitting there when she heard a bag drop nearby and a sharp exclamation of frustration. An elderly woman in pearls and a dark wool coat was gripping a handrail, sinking slowly toward the floor with the careful dignity of someone who knew she was about to fall and wanted to manage it gracefully. 2 people walked past without stopping. Bella got up and caught her by the elbow, guided her into a chair, and asked to see her medication. The old woman bristled at first, then relented and handed over her bag. Inside were several blister packs, a worn wallet, and a small notebook listing her prescriptions in elegant, old-fashioned handwriting. Bella studied the schedule and pointed out that 2 of the medications, taken together in the morning, would lower blood pressure sharply enough to cause exactly the kind of fall the woman had just had. The old woman asked if she was a nurse. No, Bella said. My mother was sick for years, and I memorized everything. The old woman asked where her mother was now, and Bella answered that she had buried her 7 weeks earlier. The old woman only nodded and said, I see, without offering any of the usual empty comforts, and Bella had to turn her face away. The old woman insisted on standing on her own despite Bella's caution, and in doing so she swayed and bumped into Bella hard enough to make her stumble against the wall. Seeing this, the old woman became convinced she had caused an accident and refused to let it go, eventually pulling out an old flip phone and calling for her car, insisting on taking Bella home. Bella tried to protest that she had somewhere to be, but when the old woman asked where, Bella found she had no answer that was not devastating to say aloud. The old woman studied her, then linked arms with her gently and introduced herself as Constance. Bella fell asleep in the car and woke to find herself well outside the city, driving past a line of old oak trees toward a grand house in Lake Forest. Inside, a housekeeper named Doreen fussed over her with tea and a hot meal, which Bella ate gratefully, embarrassed by how quickly she finished it. Constance watched her for a long while in silence, clearly hoping Bella would fill the quiet, but Bella only sat there calculating bus routes home. Then the front door opened, and Lucas Draycott walked in. He stopped when he saw her. "Grandmother," he said, "why is she here?" "This is the girl I mentioned," Constance said. "I never mentioned any girl to you," he replied. "I am mentioning her now," Constance said, and sipped her tea. Bella stood to leave, but Constance told her to sit back down. Lucas said nothing further to his grandmother. In his mind, one thought kept repeating. She found her way into this house within 7 weeks. He had spent years building this house into a place no one entered without his approval, and now the woman he had paid for one regrettable night was sitting in his grandmother's living room, eating a meal the housekeeper had prepared. "Go rest," he told his grandmother. "I will take her home." Constance studied him a long moment, told him not to be rude, and left the room more slowly than necessary. Alone with her, Lucas asked flatly how much his grandmother had paid her to stage the scene at the hospital, or whether she had invented the whole story herself, adding that it was a convincing performance either way. Bella, who had not eaten properly in days, who had just learned she was pregnant, who had an appointment scheduled for Sunday that she had told no one about, looked at him and told him plainly that he was being cruel. Something small shifted at the corner of his eyes, not quite a smile. "That is the first honest thing you have said to me since that night," he said. Bella told him he knew nothing about her, that he had never asked her a single question, only named a price and told her not to cling, and that she had not clung. She told him she had not known the building she worked in belonged to him until her first day, and had not known the old woman was his grandmother until he walked through the door. "You would say that regardless," he said. "Yes," she answered, "because it happens to be true, and I do not need you to believe me, because after tonight you will never have to see me again." She did not make it to the door. Constance was already standing there, along with a thin, silver-haired man carrying a briefcase, introduced as the family's longtime attorney. Constance, seated again with her tea, asked him to bring out the papers. Lucas asked what papers. The attorney produced 2 documents, a prenuptial agreement drafted under Illinois law, and an application for a marriage license requiring both parties to appear in person. Lucas asked his grandmother if she was serious. "Have I ever joked about responsibility?" she replied. "I am not marrying anyone," Bella said. Constance ignored them both and laid out a plan for the following morning at the county clerk's office. Bella pointed out that she and Lucas barely knew each other. Constance said she was not interested in how they had met, that she was old enough to have run out of patience for questions whose answers changed nothing, and that what she had seen mattered more: a woman who had stopped to help a stranger in a hospital hallway when 2 other people had simply walked past. Lucas argued that Bella was his employee, that this looked inappropriate, that there was a board of directors to consider. Constance said she no longer cared how anything looked. Bella, listening to the two of them argue over her future as if she were not standing there, finally raised her voice loud enough to stop the room cold. "I am pregnant," she said. The room went utterly still. Constance's teacup slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, and nobody looked down at it. Lucas asked, very quietly, whose it was. There was no anger in the question, only a flatness that hurt Bella more than anything he had said to her at the hotel. Bella did not answer directly. She only said she had an appointment scheduled for Sunday. Constance dismissed the attorney, who left without a word. The housekeeper came to sweep up the broken porcelain, but Constance told her to leave it. "Sit down, young lady," Constance said to Bella, and Bella sat because her legs no longer gave her a choice. Constance's tone changed completely. She told them she had heart failure, advanced stage, and that her doctor had given her roughly 10 months. She had only told him, no one else, and had carried it alone since spring. Lucas stood frozen. "Since when?" he asked. "Since spring," she repeated. Constance turned to Bella and said she was about to ask one question and would not ask it twice. She spoke of having buried her husband, her son, and having raised her grandson alone after her daughter, who had taken him in as a small child, passed away as well. She said that in the 25 years since losing her own child, there had not been a single morning she had not calculated how old he would be if he had lived. She said she did not need an heir, only wanted, before she died, to hear the sound of a child again in that house. Bella said she could not do it, that she had an appointment on Sunday. Constance said she understood, and then said that if Bella kept that appointment, she herself would stop taking her medication starting that day. Lucas told her sharply not to say that. Constance said she was 84 years old with perhaps 10 months left, and that without her medication she had 3 or 4 weeks at most, and that she had nothing left to lose by making that wager, unlike people who still had much ahead of them. Bella stood, her voice shaking but steady enough to finish what she needed to say. She told the old woman she had no right to place that weight on her, that if she did, Bella would carry the consequences for the rest of her life regardless of the outcome. Constance said she understood that, and was sorry, but that it was the only thing left she had to offer as a wager, and she was placing it on the table anyway. The room stayed silent a long time. Bella thought of her mother, and knew exactly what she would have said, that no one gets to put a price on you. Then she looked at the old woman who had just laid her own remaining life down like a final card, and recognized in her the same desperation Bella herself had worn in a hotel room 7 weeks earlier. "I will not give you an answer tonight," Bella said, and walked into the hallway alone in the dark. Lucas found her there. "We agree on one thing," he said. "That child is not mine," he told her. "I watched you take the pill 3 feet away, and I watched you swallow it. Whatever story you plan to tell my grandmother, do not try to pin another man's child on me." Bella stood there with the truth resting right behind her lips, one sentence away from telling him he had handed her a vitamin, not medicine. She could have said it in 2 seconds. But she looked at his face and saw a man who had already decided what kind of person she was before she opened her mouth, and she understood that saying it now would only sound like the next chapter of a scheme he already believed in. So she said nothing, and asked instead why he was still standing there. "Because my grandmother is dying," he said, "and I have buried enough people this year." Then he laid out terms, calmly, like reading a price list. 24 months. In public they would appear married. She would wear a ring, attend events at his side, and call his grandmother grandmother. In private, there would be no closeness, no questions asked about where he went or who visited the house. At the end of the 2 years, she would leave with a substantial settlement, paid legally and in full, along with a clean record and a fresh start in a city of her choosing. "What happens with the child is your decision," he said, "whether you keep it or not. After the 2 years, that is no longer my concern. My grandmother wants to hear a child in this house before she dies. She will. After that, I have no stake in it." Bella felt a chill at how ordinary he sounded discussing it. He added one final warning. Living in that house, she would see and hear things that were not her business, and eventually someone might approach her claiming to want to help her, claiming she was a victim who deserved protection. If she said one word to that person, he told her flatly, he would not hurt her, but he would systematically dismantle her ability to live any kind of normal life afterward, closing every door that might otherwise open for her. Bella stood there, 27 years old, having named her own price for one night 7 weeks earlier, and now hearing someone else name a price for 2 years, understanding that in neither case had she truly been the one setting the terms. Bella did not go to her Sunday appointment. She sat in her apartment all afternoon holding her phone, neither canceling nor going, and by 3 o'clock the appointment had simply lapsed. That was how the biggest decision of her life ended up being made, not through a yes, but through stillness. On Tuesday morning, they went to the county clerk's office. No photographs, no flowers, only Constance and the attorney present. 3 days later, Bella went to collect a security deposit from her old landlord, a man who claimed to have no record of it, and suggested crudely that there might be other ways to work something out. Lucas appeared in the doorway before she could respond, calmly informed the landlord that his various cleaning contracts across the city would evaporate within a day if this was not resolved immediately, and reminded him that he had never needed to do more than make a phone call. Within a week, the deposit was returned along with a written apology Bella never bothered to read. News of the marriage spread quickly, and with it came a woman named Portia, the daughter of a major investor who had considered herself Lucas's unofficial partner for years. She confronted Bella publicly over a watch Constance had given her, accusing her of theft in front of the office, until Lucas intervened, confirmed the watch was a gift, and told the room plainly that the next time anyone touched his wife without permission, they should handle it themselves and call him afterward only to clean up. The office fell silent, and the assistant who had been needling Bella for weeks watched the exchange without blinking. Weeks later, Portia cornered Bella privately and, with unsettling calm, reminded her that contracts always run their course, and that 2 years passed quickly. No one outside the small circle around Lucas knew that exact time frame, which meant word had somehow reached her, and Bella felt a genuine chill at that realization. By the 16th week, Bella's morning sickness had passed, and she caught herself resting a hand over her stomach in quiet moments, hating that she had let herself grow attached to something she had promised herself she would walk away from cleanly. One evening, working late alone on the compliance floor, Bella received a call from the assistant demanding she retrieve physical records from a restricted archive several floors below ground before an early morning audit deadline, warning that any delay would fall on her. The archive required navigating a long, isolated corridor and a heavily secured cold storage room that her access badge should not have been able to open in the first place. Once she stepped inside collecting the requested files, the door sealed shut behind her, its lock overridden remotely from the main office upstairs the moment her entry registered. There was no handle on the inside. Her badge would not release it. Her phone had no signal. She called out, pounded on the door, and eventually understood that help would not come for hours yet. Alone in a freezing archive room, she kept moving to stay warm, counted her steps, and eventually sat down when she could no longer feel her hands, speaking softly to the child she was carrying, telling it she was sorry, that she did not want to let go anymore, and asking it to hold on just a little longer. At home, Lucas grew alarmed when Doreen told him Bella had not returned, and a call to building security confirmed her badge had been used to enter the archive level hours earlier, but never used to exit. He drove back into the city immediately, tracing her badge activity floor by floor until the trail went cold at the archive door. When he arrived, the door was locked and unresponsive, and rather than wait for a technician, he tore it open by force, driven by a memory from his own childhood of being trapped inside a wrecked car, unable to reach the people he could not save. He found Bella slumped against a shelving unit, unresponsive to her name, and carried her the length of the corridor himself, refusing to let go of her even in the ambulance. At the hospital, doctors confirmed moderate hypothermia, warmed her gradually, and eventually located a heartbeat, confirming the pregnancy had survived. The doctor told him that 2 more hours might have changed that outcome, and Lucas immediately ordered a full security review of who had access to that archive lock. The investigation revealed the override had come from the same office suite as his assistant, whose fingerprints were later found on the manual lock mechanism. Summoned to his office, she admitted everything without hesitation, revealing she had been cooperating with a federal investigation into the company for years under threat of her own prosecution. and had orchestrated the incident specifically hoping it would provoke Lucas into an admission she could use as evidence. Her plan had one flaw. She had not known Bella was pregnant, and Lucas had arrived faster than she calculated. Portia, it turned out, had known about the ongoing investigation for months and said nothing, prioritizing her own position on the board. She was removed from the company shortly after, her father's investment repaid in full, and she left Chicago for good not long afterward. A hospital doctor later visited Lucas privately with a photograph of a common vitamin supplement, the same shape and color Bella had described, and Lucas realized with a sinking clarity that his grandmother left identical vitamins in bedside drawers throughout every home and hotel room he stayed in, a habit of hers for 20 years, and that in his drunken state that night, he had reached into the wrong drawer entirely. A subsequent paternity test confirmed what that meant. The children were his, and there were two of them, a boy and a girl. Sitting alone afterward, he replayed everything he had said to her, the accusations, the contract forcing her to leave after 2 years, the cruel assumption that the child could not be his, and understood that she had known the truth for months and said nothing. Because speaking up would only have looked like the next calculated step in a scheme, he had already convinced himself she was running. He did not go home that night. He sat with the truth until morning and did not speak to her for over a week afterward. When he finally confronted her with the results, she finally let out everything she had been holding back, the unfairness of being both blamed for taking his money and doubted for the child she carried, the cruelty of being handed something and told it was medicine without being allowed to ask a single question. He told her he had spent his whole life assuming everyone who approached him carried a hidden plan, and that he had judged her the same way from the very first night, wrongly, because liars, he said, never remember uneven numbers, and she never had a reason to lie. I accept responsibility, he told her, not for my grandmother's sake, not for the family name, but because they are my children and you are my wife. On paper, she said. Then we tear up the paper, he answered. Before she could respond, the doorbell rang, and a young woman calling herself Lucas Draycott arrived with a lawyer, claiming to be Lucas's long-lost sister, supposedly a survivor of the same explosion that had killed his birth father years earlier. Constance, stunned, tested her claims against old memories, a childhood scar, and a severe food allergy Lucas claimed to have since resolved through medical treatment. When Constance offered a plate of cookies, unaware they had been intentionally left free of the allergen as a quiet test by Bella, Lucas ate one without asking a single question, something Constance said her real granddaughter would never have failed to do out of caution built from a lifetime of managing that same allergy. A DNA test soon confirmed Lucas had no biological connection to the family at all, but in the process of running it, the lab flagged a genuine match on file, an actual biological grandchild connection between Constance and someone else entirely, the very same sample submitted for Bella's own prenatal testing. Days later, a pastor arrived carrying the same yellowed envelope he had kept sealed for 25 years, along with an old handkerchief and a handwritten note in Ukrainian. The note explained that Bella's mother had found a small child alone at the edge of a highway outside a fatal accident scene decades earlier, reported it to local police, waited for someone to claim her, and when no one came, raised her as her own, naming her Bella. Constance realized, with dawning horror, that she had personally driven past that same small police station multiple times during her search decades earlier and never stopped, assuming her missing granddaughter would surely be found at a larger hospital instead. Shortly after, federal investigators raided the company, and Constance took full responsibility for the underlying financial wrongdoing herself, revealing she had shielded her grandson behind the company's public face for years to protect him from people who would have exploited a grieving child, calling it the true crime of her life. She pleaded guilty, cooperated fully, and due to her declining health was allowed to serve her sentence under home monitoring, passing away peacefully less than a year later. Lucas negotiated a resolution that placed the company under strict oversight and transparency requirements going forward. Lucas was separately prosecuted for fraud. Bella went into early labor in her 34th week, and Lucas stayed by her side throughout, later naming their son and daughter for the family they had rebuilt. At the cemetery, Bella knelt at her mother's grave and said she was not cheap, only desperate, and that desperation was never a crime. Lucas knelt beside her and promised that no one would ever put a price on her again, not even himself. Constance, before her passing, told Bella's late mother's memory that she had raised Bella on far less than Constance had ever spent on a single dinner, and had raised her better than Constance had ever managed to raise her own son. Months later, on a quiet September morning by the same wall of glass overlooking the lake, Lucas stood with a cup of coffee instead of whiskey. Bella walked up behind him. "You counted, didn't you?" she asked. "Not this morning," he said. "Someone told me I needed to live longer this time." She asked what would have happened if he had not been drunk that first night. "Then I never would have seen you," he answered, "and I would have gone through my whole life without knowing what I almost missed." "Are you grateful you were drunk?" she asked. "No," he said. "I am ashamed of it every day, and that is exactly why I am still here trying." "Shame without change is only self-pity," she told him. "Change is what makes it worth something." He handed her the coffee, and for the first time in her life, Bella did not count the doors. The lesson at the heart of this story is simple. Bella was never made worthy of respect the day people learned her real family name. She earned that the night she first walked into a hard situation carrying nothing but a stack of towels and her own resolve. Circumstances do not decide a person's worth. Kindness does. The one who came out ahead in this story was not the richest or the most powerful person in it. She was a tired night shift worker who once stopped her car for a lost child who was not her own, with nothing to offer but the fact that she did not walk away. In the end, the person who stays is the one who wins. What do you think about a story like this? Have you ever been misjudged because of your circumstances, or have you ever been the one who stopped to help a stranger? Let us know in the comments below. We would love to hear your thoughts. If this story moved you, consider liking the video, sharing it with someone who might need it, and subscribing for more stories like this one. Wishing everyone watching good health and a peaceful day ahead. See you in the next video.